Hey Moon lovers, welcome to All Things Moon, lunar wisdom for everyday life. I'm Kelly Jones and I'm really excited to be sharing 30 plus years of teaching and guiding spiritual well-being. I figured I must have some wisdom to share with you all by now. As a moonologer, Astrala yoga guide, and an astrologer in training, I'll be sharing all the things that save me from this crazy world we find ourselves in, and hope that in some way I can serve you in your life too. Hey Moon lovers, so I finally made it to my second episode of All Things Moon and with Kelly Jones. And this one, as I promised, there will be a Q&A. So I have had some questions and I've had quite a few questions, but some of those questions have come up more than once. So to keep things simple, I've just chosen two of those questions because they are relative to each other, and I will be covering those. But first of all, I thought I would talk a little bit about what's going on with the moon and the planets this week and how they can possibly be affecting us collectively, but also how they've been affecting me personally, because I like to give you those stories so that you have something tangible to go on. So something that might, click something in your mind and you go, that's why that is. So my sweatshirt I have on today, if you're watching me on YouTube, you'll be able to see that it says blame it on the moon. But in actual fact, I think this week, although Mercury does get a bad rap, I think we can actually blame it on Mercury this week. So I noticed the shadow of the Mercury retrograde a week or so ago when I was on my way to a meeting, a women in business meeting that I go to called Winning Women in Leigh-on-Sea in Essex in the UK. And just previous to that, I accidentally phoned my mum. My mum lives in Australia. And of course, as soon as I got in my car, she phoned me back. So I had to say to her, I can't talk to you, Mum. I'm just about to drive to Leigh-on-Sea. And then I went to drive off and realised I had a massive puncture in my tyre. So I phoned her back and said, well, Mum, I'm not going anywhere, so I might as well talk to you. And that was a day I was also trying to get to the post office. And well, my brother came to the rescue and everything was fine. I got a new tyre and all of that. But that whole instance was around communication and travel. And when the planet Mercury, which is the planet of communication, starts to slow down, it's like a big tanker pulling into port. And when that tanker pulls into port and starts to slow down, it definitely makes a few waves that can be a little disruptive. And if you think of that happening, that's what happens when Mercury stations to go retrograde. And what does retrograde mean? Well, it's an optical illusion. It's a bit like if you're on the motorway in your car and you start to slow down and the car beside you that was going slower goes faster, it feels like you're going backwards. So when we look up at Mercury, it's slowing down and stationing, which means that the signs and everything that's still moving makes it appear as if it's going backwards. But the effects of that can affect things to do with communication and technology and travel. So it's taken me a couple of goes. I did actually record a second episode and I decided that I was just trying to force it out of me. It didn't feel authentic, so I deleted the whole thing. And then yesterday, I was all set up to record, and as I have explained to you before, I always do a little ritual of some kind to get myself centered and grounded. So I got on my yoga mat yesterday morning, and my cat, Indy, she loves to come and join me for yoga. So I thought it'd be funny to film her and for a little bit of entertainment on Instagram. And so I had my phone up on this tripod, and whilst in triangle pose, I noticed that my phone had started to ring. So I had to stop filming, and I thought it was my partner, but it was actually my cousin who lives over in the south of France. And he had called to tell me that his mum, my auntie, had been found dead in her sleep yesterday morning, by my cousin's daughter, my auntie's granddaughter. So, as you can imagine, I really didn't feel like recording this podcast yesterday. And to be honest, I still am a little emotional today, and it has taken me quite a long while to get round to actually finally doing this. I've had to have something to eat, had to kind of be in a little bit of routine, do a bit of research, and finally I'm here. So on Tuesday evening, we had a new moon in Sagittarius. And every new moon, I hold an online moon ceremony. Also every full moon. But we've just had a new moon, so I will talk to you a little about that. In future episodes, I will divulge a lot more information around what new moons mean. But I thought I would just share a little bit about what this particular moon ceremony was all about. So currently the sun is in the sign of Sagittarius. It's Sagittarius season. And if the sun was in Sagittarius when you were born, that is your sun sign, or as people call it, your star sign. You also have such a thing as a rising sign and a moon sign. And I will talk about moon signs as well in another future episode. But one of the questions that I had from one of my good friends and someone who's been listening and taking note sent me a lovely email with lots of suggestions for what I could talk about, and she happened to ask about rising signs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today as well. But what I'm going to tell you now is that my rising sign is Sagittarius. So this particular new moon in Sagittarius, which means a new moon is when the sun and the moon are together in a sign. A full moon is when they're in the opposite, when the moon is opposite the sun in its opposition sign. So sun and the moon are together in the sign of Sagittarius. But we also have, and forgive me for looking at my notes, so because I have things to remember to tell you, we've also got, so you could say it's big news of this new moon, is that the sun and the moon were squaring Neptune very shortly after the moon was new. So the moon was new on Tuesday. And then eventually, in this same cycle, Mars, which is also residing in the sign of Sagittarius at the moment, is going to square Neptune. And then eventually, because Mercury is retrograde and the signs are moving, at the moment, Mercury is retrograde in Capricorn, which is the next sign along to Sagittarius. But it's going to eventually come back into Sagittarius. So we're also going to have Mercury square Neptune. So that's the sun, the moon, Mars, and Mercury all in a square to the planet Neptune. And a square is what you would call a more challenging aspect. So we have, on the one hand, the challenge of what that might bring us, But we've also got the lovely newness of the moon in Sagittarius, which is the sign of optimism, adventure, exploration, humour, philosophy. It's the archer, it's a fire sign, it's passion. So, where we partially should be filled with optimism, I feel like it's been waves of that at the moment. You know, like I said, with this big tanker pulling into the port and causing big waves. So there'll be this big wave of feeling optimistic and adventurous and independent and very Mars like action, wanting to get on with what you want to get on with. And then these waves of the Mercury retrograde, the waves of this Neptune illusionary, deceptive energy, all kind of comes into this sort of waves of coming in and out of, you know, feeling quite bright and then feeling a little confused by everything. What else can I tell you? We've also got the planet Jupiter has been retrograde for quite a while in Taurus. So the end of this month on December 30th, just before New Year's Eve, Jupiter is turning direct. So again, just like when it goes retrograde, when it turns direct, it's starting to move slowly and causing those waves. And Jupiter is expansive. It expands whatever it's near to and in. So that's going to be something that worth taking note of for the end of the month, being that it's in the sign of Taurus, which is to do with the earth, food and money. But Jupiter is a lucky sign. It's a benefic. So hopefully it means that something, it's going to expand the good things, because we do tend to focus on, you know, what's the worst that could happen. So at this new moon ceremony that I've just held, we always do some journaling. So I give you some journaling prompts, and then whilst everyone is journaling together, I will pull some oracle cards. And it's always amazing. What comes out is always relative to what we've been journaling around. And one of the questions that I asked everyone, not just to write down an answer, but to practice between now and the next full moon, is what's the best that could happen? Is that something that we practice asking ourselves? I don't think so. So, being open to new opportunities and welcoming abundance that flows into our lives, and trusting in the journey of life and embracing the unknown with courage. That was really the energy of the new moon in Sagittarius, although we have got this slightly challenging aspect of this square to Neptune. And just to give you a little bit of information about that, even though if you think of Mars being like a cosmic cheerleader, wanting you to get on with things, the square to Neptune, if you think in big terms, Sagittarius is a big picture thinker, so they can tend to overdo our expectations. So this new moon is forming a square to Neptune, so we should watch out for deception, particularly self-deception and procrastination. And see, look at what I have quite honestly told you about I almost got tearful with myself for procrastinating and putting this podcast off for so long. But then forgiving myself, knowing that nothing at the moment is going to begin with any kind of speed. So we want to get on with things. You know, we can imagine new possibilities using the Neptune energy to imagine and dream, but not to deceive ourselves. and to watch out for being deceived. We've also got a harmonious, Mars is harmoniously flowing with the energy of Chiron. And Chiron is known as the wounded healer. So you might feel that there's a strong need to do some healing at the moment around any inner wounds that you might have. But because Mars is kind of nicely or beautifully intertwined with Chiron and the moon, it might make you feel more motivated to get to the root of your problems. So something that has been troubling you for a while might find it easier to manage right now as well. So there's some of the sort of energies of this new moon. So what would happen at a new moon ceremony is we do it on Zoom, and I tell everyone to get cozy, light a candle, bring their journal and their pen, bring your favourite herbal brew or cacao or whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable. And to set yourself up maybe a little altar if that's what you want to do. I always set an altar which is specific to that moon energy, and then I share with you what I've got on that altar and why I've chosen it, and that might be the crystals that I've chosen, herbs that are useful for that energy, and maybe I might even find a particular potion that I've made, a tincture, or even sometimes a spell. So today, before I came on to do this, I pulled myself an oracle card because I like to use it as some kind of guidance for myself. And I used a particular set of cards I've got they're called spell casting oracle cards. So if you're on YouTube, you would see that. And I can show you the card that came out. But the card that came out was the Spirit Guide card. So like there's this beautiful image of someone in spirit and their reflection. And obviously for me, I've just had a family member pass on into and back into spirit. And I really was talking to her last night, realizing that it's probably still a bit of a surprise and she's not really settled into being where she is right now. But I was still hoping that she could hear me and see me and know that I was thinking of her and being aware and remembering our good memories of each other. And the Spirit Guide card coming up is also a card which reminds you to look for the signs. You know, it might come in a song, it might come through somebody else, through listening to somebody else's words, it might be something that you read, you know, the classic things like feathers. But also just to remember that, you know, we've always got spirit with us, watching over us. So that was, you know, something for me to know while I'm doing this, and knowing that for whatever reason I'm doing this, I'm hoping that I'm guiding someone else at the same time. So I'm being guided and hopefully I'm guiding you in some way. So getting to those questions, and I was just telling you about the moon ceremony, wasn't I? So what else do we do in a moon ceremony? I always open it as if we're sitting in circle, and I open it with an invocation, and I call in all the elements and all our ancestors and spirit guides. And then I will fill you in on the lunar news. So whatever is going on, like I've just filled you in then, that's the lunar news. And then we will do a meditation, and then the journaling with the prompts and the oracle cards. And then we close with a little new moon ritual. And a new moon is always a time to set intentions for the next moon cycle and to write down your intentions and your wishes. And what I will usually do is go around everybody with letting them know which house area of their life this particular moon is going to affect according to their rising sign, which brings me nicely to my questions I've had. So a lovely lady called Sylvia, she left a message on Spotify for me. Let's just get to the question. Yeah, she left a message on Spotify for me. Really nice message, which was wonderful because it's my first ever podcast. So I was very excited that somebody who I didn't know, had actually listened to it and commented as well. So I am just going to pop on my glasses so I can read this to you. So Sylvia said she just wanted to say how much she resonated with my story, and also as a Cancerian who started a podcast after years of feeling afraid. So, we're never alone. And when we share our stuff, it's always giving permission to somebody else to feel better about their stuff too. And she asked me, can you do a moonology chart without knowing your time of birth? Well, the answer to that is not really. Because we need to know what was in what sign the first house was in at your time of birth, because that is your rising sign, and that is where we start from. So when I do a moonology reading, I will have a printout of the whole 12 houses of the zodiac, so all 12 signs, and then you've got your 12 houses, which is all the different temples or areas or places in life. So the first house is to do with your self-identity, to do with your image, your appearance, and how you come across to the world. And we go from that first house to plot every new moon for the next year and every full moon and which house that's going to fall in. So if we don't know the time of your birth, then we could be going from completely the wrong rising sign and from the wrong house, which would make it all kind of irrelevant. So there are ways to find out if you don't know your time of birth. So suggested ways are, if you don't know, is quite often people know as near to it as possible. So they have an approximate time of day. So we can go from that and see how that feels and how that looks. We can also use what some people might not trust, and they might want something much more definite. But I think, part of why I do this is to help to teach you to trust yourself more, to trust your intuition and your inner knowing more. So if we had an approximate and I looked up, put those details in and got you your birth chart done and explained that to you, if that really didn't feel right or feel like you, then you are right, and that wouldn't be it. So we would look again and start moving it around slightly across the minutes, because I did write it down here somewhere, but the ascendant changes on average every 4 minutes. So, this is going to dictate how your chart is laid out from the first house to the 12th house. Your rising sign is not just based on your date and time of birth, but also the place. So someone born at the same day and time as you, but in a different place, will have the same planets, but a different rising sign because of the houses and the signs moving. So that's also known as your ascendant, your rising. Now, this is because the rising sign is the constellation of the zodiac. So if you look at the zodiac and you look at the first house, that will be where the constellation of the zodiac is coming up over the eastern horizon. It's always the eastern horizon, which would be that way for you, I think. But it's always the eastern horizon at the moment you were born, and will be the sign that is in the first house. So my lovely friend Helen, as I said, asked me about, she said, I think it's the rising sign you talk most about in relation to the moon and personal relevance. Could you explain what a rising sign is and why it's related to the moon in this way? So basically, it's much more personal, and it's also that first house. So when we're going from the dark into the light, and as I said, it represents your self-identity, your appearance or image, how you come across to the outside world. It's, personal about you. Another way to find out about your time of birth is, I did find a site, if you live in the UK, called Find My Past, which has a directory of births and deaths and marriages on it. So that might be worth looking at. You might be able to find. And I also think if you were like baptized or christened, it might have information there as well. So also the other way, and let me get this right so I can tell you correctly, because you could do things like, as I said, trusting our intuition. You could do things like kinesiology, muscle testing, the swaying technique, where when you sway one way, it's a yes or a no. You could use a pendulum. Ultimately, they're all intuition. But there's also an astrological way of doing it that professional specialist astrologers can use, which is called rectification. So it's a procedure used to find a person's birth time when it is otherwise unknown or uncertain. So they will use astrological ways about asking you questions about past experiences, and then going, back in time in your history to try and pinpoint certain things that have happened to make sure that they have got your time correct and accurate. But that would be a highly experienced astrologer. And as I have explained to you before, if you haven't listened to me before, I'm just partway into my training. I'm training with Nightlight Astrology with Adam Ellenbass. I'm studying Hellenistic astrology, so that's ancient astrology for the modern mystic. And I'm sort of in the point now where I feel like I know nothing. So about 6 months in, and I was really understanding it at first, and now we've got to put it all together. And I like to keep things simple and explain them as in plain English as I can. And we're at that point where it's not plain English at the moment. So I'm going to be happy when I've found a way of explaining what I'm learning without it sounding too complicated, so that I can, explain it to you in a really easy to understand kind of way. So I hope this has helped you in some way to understand some of the stuff around the moon. And if you're only just getting into it, then obviously some of it now might not be making sense. So please do send me your questions so I can endeavour to answer them in my next episode. And I've asked to cover moon signs. So they're kind of like your most important three. Everybody has all signs in their birth chart, but the time, date, and place of birth makes a difference to how those signs and houses affect us. So the moon sign is wherever the moon was at that time of birth. And your moon sign covers and relates to emotions, intuition, and our personal inner world. So it's kind of how we are emotionally. So to give you an idea, I am a Virgo moon. So the moon was in the sign of Virgo when I was born. So I love to analyze emotions. So I'm going to, do a bit more research on there for you. Find a nice, easy. So I'm going to, do a bit more research on there for you. Find a nice, easy way to explain it to you, and I'll cover that in a future episode. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about today. I'm just happy I've got on here and got to the end. And the next full moon is in Cancer. That is on the sort of the end of the 26th into the beginning of the 27th of December. So I know that is kind of Christmas, Boxing Day, Christmas, visiting the family time for a lot of us. So I won't be holding a moon ceremony online on that day, but I will be endeavouring to record a mini moon ceremony for everybody so that you don't miss out on the lunar news, and I'll give you some journaling prompts. And so it will be out there, it's just we won't be gathering live together for this next full moon. So I will be meeting up again with everyone in January, and I will be sure to let you know when that is as soon as I have got it all on my website. So on that note, Yule blessings to everybody. We have the winter solstice coming up. That's the time that I like to celebrate, that season of, the darkest night, the shortest day, and after that, everything starts to get brighter. So sending you love and peace and happiness, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Bye for now.